And the Browns go in and score again.
4 touchdown passes on the day, and we're not even at halftime.
Throws right side, it's picked off. They got it down the sideline. It's Denzel Ward. He's to the 35, 40. He's to the 50. He's to the 40, 30, 20, 15, 10, 5. Touchdown! A pick six. Denzel Ward is back. On the right side to Chubb. Chubb over the 50. Chubb to the 45. Chubb to the 40. Down the sideline, 30, 25, 20, 15, 10, 5. There he goes. Touchdown, Nick Chubb.
Yes, welcome back everybody to another episode of the Believeland Brits podcast, and today we are, I think, well rested for once. There's no emotional roller coaster to have to go through. The AFC North kind of, you knew what was going to happen anyway. It was a relatively chill weekend if you're a Browns fan. Dare I say, if you're even a Cavs fan, it's all been rather chill in the land of Cleveland sports over the last week, I'd say. Sean, how was your week, bud? Was yours as chilled as I've described, or are you still in renovation hell?
Still in renovation hell, nearly at the end of that, thank the Lord. But yeah, from a sports perspective, mate, it was a pretty good weekend. Like you said, the Browns couldn't cause any issues. The Villa beat Man United for the first time in 27 years at home. So yeah, it was a pretty good weekend, mate. Pretty good.
Yeah, not bad. That was one I definitely enjoyed as well. And my beloved Eintracht Frankfurt made it through to the Champions League knockouts as well. So all good with the round ball. Just need to see as to how the slightly oval one goes in the next week and beyond. Oh, I know, a man in Wales recouping well from your op.
Yeah, just trying to get the last bits of the swelling out now and sort of learning to walk again type thing. So. Yeah, having a 2-year-old learning to do stuff like opening the freezer and getting in places that she shouldn't be has proved challenging over the last 2 weeks, but yeah, getting on with it.
Who would run the 40 quicker, you or your daughter right now?
Right now, I'd probably still take it.
It's a close one, though.
Yeah, it would be much closer.
One. It's a double-digit second time, but you'd still just about pip it.
Just about. I'd be dipping on the line, even with a bad knee.
Oh, brilliant! Right, so I think that this week's podcast is going to be a little loopy like this, everyone, because it's a little free. We don't have anything to review. We're just going to go straight into the Dolphins preview for this week. And then just a little talk around the NFL, and then we'll be done. Yeah, it's just the way that a bye week goes, really. And it's not like we even lost a bye week. You know, there was no trade deadline stuff to worry about. That was all handled last week. The Ravens and the Bengals kind of did what you expect them to do. So, yeah, you can't even say, because there have been times, haven't there, in the past where the Browns could have been said to have lost during the bye week. I think last year, wasn't that when OBJ left, for example, and you had all the turmoil of that? Yeah, so in fact, you could even argue that the Browns have won the bye week because it looks like Denzel Ward and Wyatt Teller are both back in training. So, yeah,
and the possibility of Josh Allen being out.
And the possibility of Josh Allen being out. We'll touch on that later when we come to do our pick six later on. But yeah, it's a little too positive on the Believeland Brits podcast today, everyone. There's actually a little bit of belief, dare I say it. Anyway, let's jump into this week's game. So the Miami Dolphins, they're 6-3. They scraped past the Chicago Bears in their Week 9 matchup. I think it was like 33-31 or 34-32, something like that. It was high anyway. It definitely smashed the over. And let's see as to what we've picked as our keys to the game this week. So first of all, Owain, this one is for you. The one of which you've brought up, Tame, Tua, and Tyreek. I believe that this is focusing on their passing game.
Yeah, I think, it's no secret how they are getting success this season. Is through the air. They seem to, take deep shots, every drive multiple times. Jalen Waddle and Tyreek Hill are just open all the time. Be interesting to see. I think last week where Tyreek went off last week, I think maybe got up to 200 yards, but if he didn't, he wasn't far off. I think he got 2 touchdowns as well. But it was interesting. They played a lot of man against Miami last week, and that's something you wouldn't really expect against the skill set of those 2 wide receivers. So another interesting point really is that the Browns, they've been talking about playing a lot more man lately to match up with the skills of our secondary. So I'd wonder if they go back to playing really zone heavy. Even though they have started to play a little bit more man, they are, I think, still leading the amount of, the percentage of zone in the whole league. So I'd imagine they go back to playing pretty much exclusively zone coverage against these wide receivers next week. And yeah, maybe this will disappoint a few fans probably that don't like the way Joe Woods tends to call defense and has done in the past, where they play a lot of off coverage. But I don't think it would be the worst decision in the world this week. I think it's fair to say, because you run the risk of just massive chunk plays otherwise. And yeah, I think it'll be about trying to get them to third and long, and then when they do get to third and long, you've got to take advantage of it. But definitely trying to tame that pass game of the Dolphins is going to be a massive challenge for the Browns, and one that they have to win to keep this game close for me.
Yeah, and it's definitely going to be through the passing game as well. Miami is not a team that runs, at least not effectively. So that obviously means that they're going to score 2 rushing touchdowns this week. But in terms of getting back to a sense of reality for a second, their biggest rusher is Raheem Mostert on 478 yards for the season. So we're not exactly talking prolific runners. This is all going to be in the passing game. It's all going to go through Tua and mainly Tyreek and Jalen Waddle. In terms of receiving yards, they are far and away their biggest their biggest threats. Tyreek Hill already has over 1,000 yards for the season. He's on 1,104. Jalen Waddle's on 812. In terms of yards per game, that puts Tyreek Hill at over 120 and Jalen Waddle on 90. And then Tua throws about 282 yards a game. So if you think about it, it's about keeping a stranglehold on those 2 players. If we do play a lot of zone when we're looking to be conservative on the pass. I wonder as to whether or not you should actually just look to keep your most athletic players on Tyreek and on Jalen Waddle, because without them, they struggle. Do you try and go Patriots way with it almost and just try and keep those on lock?
Yeah,
I think
so.
This is a bend down break week for the defense. I think you have to accept the fact that Miami are going to make their share of plays. You look at what they've done throughout the season. 36 plays of over 20 yards in the passing game, including 8 over 40 yards. They're an explosive offense. Talked about it on the Full 10 Yards podcast this week, that you could make the argument they've possibly got 2 of the top 5 receivers in the entire league this year, based on what Waddle and Hill have put out there on the field. And it's not necessarily a good matchup for anybody. They lead the league in passing yards, 2,757, and let's not forget that Tua was injured for 3 games as well. Where their offense really did take a step back in those 3 weeks. So, you look at the 6 games that Tua's actually played. I think you just said there, mate, something like 282. It feels more than that. I'm not denying what you've said there, but it feels like he's always throwing for a lot more than that. I think in terms of the run game, I think Jeff Wilson looked good in limited action last week. They obviously brought him in at the trade deadline, someone that Mike McDaniel's familiar with. And I think as much as anything, he'll be involved in the sort of passing game out of the backfield as well. I think he does give them a bit of a different dimension that they haven't necessarily had through the first half of the season. They'll obviously be looking for him to be a difference maker for them down the stretch. The unfortunate thing for the Browns in this one is it comes back now to one of these games that, because of results earlier in the season, this now feels like must win. You know, I know we keep harping back to it, but if you think they'd have just got over the line in that Jets game, then all of a sudden this one wouldn't have half as much pressure as what it feels as though it does have today, you know, this weekend. But I do think that, you know, Tyreek, Jalen Waddle, Mike Gesicki, you know, they all are able to make plays. I think they will make plays. I think, like I say, the 9 games in now, no one's found the answer to it as of yet. So I do think it is just a case of keeping it in front of you. I think you've just summed it up nicely there, that I think they will play a bit more off ball. I think they'll play a bit more zone. I think they'll keep it in front. And then, like I say, they'll look to stiffen in the red zone would be what I would suggest that they try and do. They won't try and get beaten over the top. You know, so it'll be interesting to see if on those key money downs, when you get to third down, when you get into the red zone, whether the defense can really step up. But I would be expecting that the Dolphins will be making their fair share of plays, you know, throughout the course of the game.
Yeah, absolutely. And it is going to be the biggest issue. I do feel more confident than I did 2-3 weeks ago, but it's still going to be very, very difficult. Miami is one of the best offenses in the league right now, one of the best teams in the league right now. So, you know, that doesn't come without their fair share of threats. Well, let's take a look at our threats, shall we? And Sean, this is the point that you wanted to raise, and I feel like you raise this almost every week. You just say it in a slightly different way. It's definitely something of which you believe in quite heavily, but I do see your point in this, definitely with how Chicago were able to get their yards and their points last Sunday. I've titled it just "Run Away with It," but I know that you want to go deeper.
Yeah, look, I think it's, as much as anything, I think this is potentially our best form of defence this week. Tyreek Hill can't make any plays while he's sitting on the sideline. You know, so I think this is about the Browns trying to control the clock. It's about having long, sustained drives. You know, can we get the Jacoby Brissett that we saw in the game against the Bengals, when for me the balance was extremely, extremely good. You know, he was efficient, which is what he was in the first few weeks of the season. And it really enabled their offense to do what it does best. It didn't get away from the run game. It utilised, you know, Chubb, Hunt. We also saw some Dearness Johnson as well once the game was put to bed. We know we've got a really potent running attack. And for me, like you said, you look at what happened in terms of last week's game and the amount of yards that the Bears racked up. Admittedly, a lot were from Justin Fields himself. You know, Justin Fields put up an absolute monster day. It was the most rushing yards by a quarterback in any regular season game in NFL history. He put up 178 on the ground himself, which is just phenomenal when you think about it. But overall, you know, you were approaching 250 rushing yards for the Bears last week. This is a defense that can be gotten at. As much as we've talked about how good their offense has been, you know, this is a defense that gave up 27 points and 4 consecutive touchdown drives to the Detroit Lions 2 weeks ago. It gave up 32 points to the Chicago Bears last weekend, and barring a very questionable couple of pass interference calls down the stretch, it could have very easily been that the Bears actually ended up winning this game. I think Miami were quite fortunate to get one in their favour, which led to points, and then they were very, very fortunate to not get one called on them, which would have certainly moved the Bears down the field. You know, so this is certainly a team that you can get at. They have obviously lost those 3 games. Like I said, admittedly, that was with 2 are out of the lineup. But I just think the Browns need to just be true to who they are. And, you know, I know me and Owain have gone backwards and forwards on this for the couple of weeks that you've been away, mate. And I know we've got slightly different sort of thought processes on it. But I'm just a firm believer in just play the hand that's your best hand and what you've got in front of you. I'd love for the Browns to be able to chuck it all over the field and compete in a shootout against this Dolphins offense. Nothing would be more entertaining than a 49-42 shootout. But I just don't think we've got the pieces to be able to do that. I think the way we win this game is just controlling the clock, controlling the time of possession. You know, real long 10, 12 play drives if we can get them going. You know, look at what the Baltimore Ravens did on Monday night. They actually ran the ball, Baltimore, 40 times on Monday compared to 22 passing plays. You know, they're not afraid of who they are. And all of a sudden they're at 6-3. And I think for the Browns, it's a case of, look, this really worked well against Cincinnati 2 weeks ago. Don't forget that. Let's just go back to what we've been doing well. Get Chubb involved, get him involved early, get him involved often. And, let's hope we don't ask him too much of Jacoby Brissett, but he's in one of those mindsets and one of those games where what he does efficiently, and he gets the help and support of Cooper, DPJ, to make enough plays in the passing game that the Dolphins have to respect that and don't just stack the box.
Yeah. Wine, Nick Chubb, when he gets about 20 touches a game, the Browns usually win. Do you think that Nick Chubb gets 20 touches in this game? I'm not asking if we win. I'm just asking the 20 touches. Don't worry.
I hate
I'm not asking you to make that statement.
Yeah,
it's also not true, but
if you are winning games late on, then your running back gets more touches anyway because you want to solve the game away. So we're not winning games purely because Nick Chubb has had 20
How
carries.
dare you disagree with Brown's Twitter, sir?
Yeah,
we look at the stat line only.
But I think picking up on something that Sean said there, I think that it is a fine way to go about this game is to run the ball more and try and eat up that clock. But the thing that you have to be able to do in that case is play good defense. Like the Ravens played incredibly good defense on Monday night, and were able to run the ball a lot more because they weren't giving up as much points. If we go out there and run the ball the whole first half, but every time that Miami have a drive, they end up scoring points, then it becomes a lot less effective to then run the ball and chew up that clock because you're giving yourself a tougher task in getting back into that game. So, I'm absolutely fine. I think that's, that may be the route to go down this week is to run the ball and limit time of possession. But the big caveat to that is you have to play good defense and stop the other team scoring points. Otherwise, it's just not going to work. You might as well lose in a shootout otherwise because, if you're 2-3 scores down, running the ball is not going to do much for you.
Yeah, and I think that part of that, especially when it comes to limiting them on defense, a lot of that I think is going to come back to what made us really effective last week against the Bengals is that applying the pressure. The Dolphins, for all their praises, in terms of protecting the quarterback, have not been very good. I think that's been shown by the obvious issues that they've had in terms of the injuries at quarterback and what those injuries have been and where they've come from, mainly from sacking the quarterback and them getting concussed. But if you look at their stat line in terms of defensive impact on their offense, 17 sacks and 7 interceptions in 9 games. That shows that there is a lot to be won out there because of the fact that they are trusting their passing game. And, while it is considered a juggernaut and these wide receivers are great, it is only still 280 yards a game that they're throwing. So it's definitely not, it's not exactly an offense to be feared. It's one to compete with, I would suggest. Now, am I maybe just looking at it a little too by the numbers, or because, I know the eye test might make it seem like Tua is, his passer rating is 115.9. He is a very good passer of the football and their game is doing very well, but there's definitely a way for the defense to have its impact.
Yeah, listen, I completely agree. I think that, like I said, this is a matchup for me that I think when we get to Pick'ems, and we'll talk about some of the other games, I would imagine, I haven't looked yet, but probably I'm guessing 80 to 90% of people will probably be picking the Dolphins overall in this game. So I think they are obviously favourites. They're at home, but I certainly don't think it would be the world's biggest surprise for the Browns to turn up there and give them a real game. There's a number of teams that are sort of in this sort of mould for me where people have possibly got really high expectations of a team. The Chargers are another one for me. They're 5-3 and just about scraping results each week. They're certainly not blowing me away. I think Miami could go either way in this one. 3 weeks ago they were off the back of a 3-game losing streak and things were looking really down in the dumps. All of a sudden, a few good results and people are talking up the chances of a long postseason run again. I think the Browns match up quite well against them in terms of where our strengths are defensively. We've seen signs in the last 2 or 3 weeks, haven't we, of the defense getting things together. Myself and Owen talked about John Johnson and the fact that he seemingly has taken on the responsibility of the green dot. It'll be interesting to see if that remains the case this weekend, because obviously the secondary is going to be vitally important to our chances, as has already been described. But I think and completely agree with what everybody said so far. I think the way to do this is, like we said, to try and get up early. The Browns aren't really built to come from behind. We know that. It's almost one of those games, if you win the toss, you almost want to take the ball and try and get some points on the board, to be honest, which is normally, not the thing that you do. But I certainly think the Browns are built to play from in front. And as you said, Myles Garrett hopefully can have himself a big day, put some pressure on, and we can force some turnovers and things. So I wouldn't, spoiler coming up, I don't think it's going to be the biggest surprise to see the Browns win. Let's put it that way.
Well, just before I jump into my point, I took a look at what the Pick'ems currently have voted for, and what would you say, without looking? What would you say? How many % of people have voted for the Dolphins in that?
Yeah, well, I said 80 to 90 there when I was doing it, so I'll probably go 89% Dolphins. Might even be higher than that, but I'll go 89.
Oh, Wayne, I'll give you an over under of that.
I did mine this morning, and I know most of the games are above 80 this weekend. Off the top of my head, I would probably say just under.
It's 96%. 96% have voted for the Dolphins. That's actually outrageous. We are a 3.5 point underdog in terms of the sport books, but
which is interesting.
96%. Was it? Sorry.
Which is picking up on the spread. That's quite interesting because you tend to think that bookmakers add 3 points to the home team, and when they're making a spread. So on a neutral field, the bookmakers think we're half a point different to Miami, which is really interesting to look at it with all the shortcomings we've had this season with Jacoby Brissett at quarterback, Tua playing well. I know you mentioned Miami's pass yards being 280 per game, and saying that's not scary. It's actually third in the NFL, by the way. So.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I just checked, and they're on 293. They're actually second behind the Chiefs, which are 18 point yards per game more on the site that I'm looking at. But I find that
has the NFL just abandoned the pass? I mean, I remember when 350 yards was considered tame.
Yeah, maybe times have changed. I know offenses are a little less efficient so far this season than they have been in the past. But yeah, going back to the spread, it does interest me, because I would have thought, given how the two teams have performed up to now, I would have thought that the spread would be much bigger than 3.5. Looking at maybe 5-6 points. So it tells you a little story of what the bookmakers are thinking about the game.
Yeah, I think that the Bears game has spooked them, and I think that our Bengals game has spooked them. Just going in the opposite directions there. And then an interesting little stat nugget before I move into my point here. The Browns actually average more points than the Dolphins, 25 points to 23.7, and both concede 24.9 on average. Take that with pinches of salt, obviously, especially with Miami having to play with second and third quarterbacks at times. But these are not things that are discounted when it comes to doing things like that. So, the one thing which I want to point out, and Sean's already touched on it, is that the Browns are a team that is very much built to lead from the front. And this is all about momentum. The game against the Bengals, they got that early interception. They weren't able to capitalize on it, but they were able to pick up the momentum again and then just drive with it and just continue building upon momentum. If you've got a good team in front of you, you want to be playing with a lead. This team wants to play with a lead because it's the only way that seemingly it can settle. We've lost games mainly because we've had to come back from behind and we've just not done enough. So I could fully expect for us to ask for the ball if we win the coin toss, go for a long running drive to get 7, and then try to, then you look for the win on defense, and then you just look to build on and on and on, much like in the same way of the Bengals game. So, for me, the Browns have done best when it's been about being in front and leading from the front, and with everything else in situ, got to close that running game, win that passing game, got to be able to establish ourselves on the line of scrimmage on offense. But it is about just constantly coming up with those plays that keep you in the game. Because the one thing which I really took away from the Bengals game was the amount of plays made, not just the ones which caused turnovers, but the tackle to stop it on 3rd down, the sack that was incredibly needed, the pass that was able to convert it from a long 3rd down to a good chunk of yardage for a 1st down. Being able to constantly keep the game in front of you, and like you said as well, Sean, running down the clock. Have the confidence that you're going to score and run that clock down, because you don't want it to get away from you points wise. You don't want to have to score 30 points. You want to score 21, 22 points and still come away with it. Not that Miami let you do that all that often. So, with that in mind, let us take some predictions going forward. Owain, I think that every time I've done this, you have opted for the other team so far in a way of trying to double jinx. And lo and behold, we have it here again. A good 30 to 20 in favour of the Finns.
I'm contemplating taking the Dolphins this week in one of my bets, minus 3.5, because I think the probability is that we see a bit of a defensive regression from us this week. I think Denzel coming back after like 4 weeks out, I want to say four games. I think it's a tough ask to put him against the player that's on pace to have the most receiving yards ever by a wide receiver in a season. That is a tough ask, especially like Denzel's main attribute is speed, and there's no one really faster in the NFL than Tyreek Hill. So we've already seen Hill have some success against Denzel, I would say, in the games that we've seen against the Chiefs. So I do think that we're on for a bit of defensive aggression. I think, if all things go to plan, I wouldn't be surprised if the Browns come out with a win here. And obviously we're really hopeful that happens, because a win here changes your season and changes the way you're looking at it. But I think I'll take the safe option, not root against the Browns, but pick against the Browns this week. And
I was going to say, don't root against us. Good Lord.
Yeah, not root against us, pick against the Browns this week. And, that's one thing that they won't be letting me down if they do lose.
Hey, hedging against the Browns financially has done quite well for us throughout the years, because at least you get paid for your sadness. That's something I wish I'd learnt years ago, but alas, I only started to do that like a year ago. Sean, ever the optimist, and the optimistic yet very Believeland-esque scoreline of 27-24 in favour of the good guys in brown and orange.
Yeah, why not? Why not? I mean, I think, we kind of get hung up a little bit on our record, don't we, at 3-5, and then you go back and you look at the losses. We've got a loss by 1 point, a loss by 3 points, a loss by 2 points, and a loss by 3 points. We, minus one game, which was the New England game, we haven't been blown out, and New England essentially just had their way with us from the get-go that afternoon, didn't they? We've been competitive in every game. We've been pretty consistent in terms of our offensive production. If you actually look at the running game, there's only again one game where we haven't topped 100 yards as a team. That again was that New England game. So we've consistently moved the ball where whoever we played against. A lot depends on, like I say, the kind of performance we get from Jacoby Brissett. If it's anything like week number 8 against the Bengals, I think we'll be fine. If it's anything like weeks numbers 1, 2, or 3, I think we'll be fine. He obviously just went through that bit of a dip, in the sort of middle part of the season so far. But I do think that the defense has shown signs of improvement. I mean, just to put that into context, they gave up 465 total yards to the Chargers. They then gave up 399 yards to the Patriots. But in the 2 divisional games since, they gave up just 254 to Baltimore and just 229 to the Bengals. It's the Bengals that, don't forget, put up 42 points this week. It's not... That's a pretty good achievement in terms of what we were able to do in those 2 games. We limited Joe Mixon to 36 yards. He nearly had that many touchdowns against Carolina, didn't he? So,
oh God, don't mention Joe Mixon to me. Talk about a fantasy league destroyer. I was against him in 2 leagues this week. Flipping 55 points.
I'm confident that the defense will continue to sort of now be more at the level it's been the last 2 weeks. I absolutely take on board the Denzel Ward thing, but I wouldn't be surprised if he is on a bit of a reduced pitch count this week, even if he does make it. I still don't think he's officially cleared protocol yet. I think all signs are that he will, but I don't think yet he's officially sort of past it. But we've said the last few weeks, haven't we, mate, that Martin Emerson's done a fantastic job. Now, don't get me wrong, this is a baptism of fire for anybody going up against these 2, and it's a totally different challenge. But, I've got confidence in what I've seen in terms of what the guy's put out there and what he's done on film.
I do think, though, that, we spoke last week about Martin Emerson and T. Higgins being a good matchup. I don't see that as being a particularly good matchup one bit. Tyreek Hill against Martin Emerson, just because skill set wise, they're worlds apart. Like Tyreek Hill is lightning off the line of scrimmage. I doubt Martin Emerson gets a glove on him when at the line of scrimmage trying to slow him up. And then once they're side by side, Martin Emerson's not particularly fast. Tyreek Hill will be gone. So I wouldn't necessarily like to see them matched up a whole lot this week, if I'm being honest. I'd rather, if Denzel is on a pitch count, which I think is perfectly reasonable, I would rather see Newsome on him personally.
Yeah, but I think
Waddle on the other side. So
yeah, exactly, and that's what comes back to what I said earlier. I think this is a week of bend don't break. I think it's going to be a lot of 2 high safeties. It's going to be a case of contain them, get to the red zone, and then stiffen up, and then the speed doesn't become as important. Obviously, let's not try and dismiss it by any stretch of the imagination, but obviously when the field is narrowed, that makes things more difficult, doesn't it? So, I think the Browns have got to, they've got to play a good game, almost a perfect game to get that scoreline. But I'd much rather go into the week with some optimism. I was really buoyed by what we saw on the Monday Night Football. It felt as though that performance was coming. I thought they were good against the Ravens. They just didn't finish. And then I thought they carried that into the Cincinnati game and played particularly well. So fingers crossed. They've had a bye week. They should be should be rested up. Myles Garrett should be even healthier after having a couple of weeks now to properly rest. And, hopefully those sort of niggling injuries that sort of still there, obviously from the car incident, will feel a whole lot better. And fingers crossed, I'm expecting and hoping for good things.
Good. I agree with a lot of that. I really do. I've ended up taking the hedge. It's a smaller hedge than Owens, particularly. I've gone for 24-26 fins because I feel like I've read this script before this year. I feel like I've read the script where it looks like we've corrected everything, or at least most things. There's a matchup that we're worried about and we're just hoping doesn't fall the other way. and we'll get to a point. I really want us to be able to lead from the front. I don't think it's going to happen. I feel we're going to be chasing and we're going to claw it back and then we're going to lose out. I really hope it's not the case, but it is just one that I feel like I've read before. Every time I felt bad about the game, apart from the Patriots game where I was unsure what to think, but when I've actually felt that something comes close, it usually goes the other way, and it usually ends up being quite a good game for us. So I'm hoping that continues into this one. 24-26. It's not it's definitely not one of which I think I'd put money on, because I think it will be quite tight. But it is a close game indeed, I think. So, speaking about picking, and I have an announcement to make, and he's been waiting for this for days. There he is, rubbing his hands. For those of you that can't see the live stream at the moment, Owain Jones has overtaken me in the NFL Pick'ems League. I have one non-PC word to say, and I would like to say it to the Los Angeles Rams defense. Fuck off. For the love of God, all you had to do was not concede a touchdown with 44 seconds to go in the game when you hadn't given them an inch. And yet you just let Tom Brady and a wine walk all over you. I could have been sitting pretty, but no. Once again, another week, another last-minute breakdown, which has seen a wine drive past me, smugly laughing as I'm there in the rain. But no, in all seriousness, well done, Owen. well done, Owen. It was a big gap for you to take up at one point, and you've had near perfect weeks for about the last 3 weeks to really bring it home. I'm never taking a holiday in the season again, because it seems that it's gone completely pear-shaped since I've come back. Sean, you've had a good week as well. 11 points, the same as the wine. That takes you up to 82. You're now just 2 points off me. A wine's now up in second place, 85. Sean's still there with 87. So the gap now is only 2 points to the top, of which means that, guys, we're close to a 1-2-3 here. There's a real chance here of a Believe in Brits podcast 1-2-3. They're going to have to come after us to. They're going to have to come after us for flipping fixing here. I don't think we can give the prize to ourselves.
Mine and Sean's form. I think we are on for that 1-2-3 if you can keep pace with us by then. But
yeah, I've got to get the confidence back up. I've had a few weeks now where I'm hurting. I feel like I've had a few injuries, and I need to just find that 1 week. I thought I was having it, and then everything just broke down in like the last quarter of the last 2 weeks.
This week is a real interesting one for me, because my game plan over the last, well, I wouldn't say game plan, but what I've done over the last 3 or 4 weeks is, identify those games that, not many people have picked for upsets. And, I sort of fancied a few of them, managed to hit on them. But this week, like I said earlier, I think most of the games this week, if not all of them, are above 70 to 80% of people thinking the same thing. So, and I got to be honest, I'm not particularly fancying any of the underdogs this week. 1 or 2.
Yeah, it's one of those, isn't it? It's one of those where you have to really like the underdog, I think.
Yeah, definitely. And I think two of the games, interestingly, that we'll talk about here, well, maybe 3 now, but Seattle and Bucks I found quite hard to pick. I found Lions and Bears really hard to pick. And then, Bills, Vikings, all depends on the status of Josh Allen. So there are probably 3 or 4 really tough ones to pick this week, and then pretty much everyone are going to go for the same ones, I think.
Yeah, so let's go through our pick six to start off with. There are 2 games of the pick six. I always try and pick the ones that are the most contentious. We somehow have agreement on 2 of the games. Colts and Raiders is a Raider blackout, and Cowboys Packers, everyone has gone for the Lone Star, of which I guess isn't surprising. The Colts are now riding with Jeff Saturday over way more experienced coaches. Sean, I assume that it was covered quite extensively in the 14 Yards podcast yesterday. Yes, if you want to know a lot more about that and about how much of a ridiculous decision that was, then head on over to the 14 Yards podcast after this, because that was a quite ridiculous decision. But hey, stranger things have happened in football, I think. And then
I do think
Aaron. Go on.
I don't know about you two, but I do think if they weren't playing, what's his name, the Texas QB, Erlinger. If they weren't playing Erlinger in this game, I'd be tempted to go Colts because I think the Raiders stink. But I think with Erlinger as QB, I think the Colts stink more. So I think this is probably the inmate game of the week, as Cleveland Browns Daily, when they do the scores at the end, would like to say the inmate game of the week for me, this one.
Now, if the Raiders stink, what do the Jags do right now?
What do you mean? What are the Jags? Do the Jags stink? Because last week the Jags beat the Raiders, so I don't know what.
Did they beat them in the end? Oh. Yeah, of course they did. I do apologize. They ended up coming back in the last. Yeah, they were another one of the last quarter, weren't they? Ugh.
Yeah, and another one. Me and Sean, noted Jaguars supporters this season. You know, you've gone on the wrong side of the Jags.
Bloody hell, the Raiders didn't score a single point in the second half. Yeah, they do stink.
21-0 up, I think, at one point.
Yeah, that's why I was there thinking, they can't be that bad. They got the dub, but no, they didn't. Bloody Nora. Yeah, so that Raiders by reluctance, I think, is the term there. And then you've got Aaron Rodgers being unable to throw to anybody at the moment. We are really seeing a decline in his career right now. I think the sympathizers will say he has no one to throw to, but when you consider as to just how poor he was against the Lions, literally throwing directly at guys that are just waiting to pick him off, it's almost like they read the script. It was ridiculous.
I think it's an interesting one, and it'll pertain to the Browns this off season, as you can never have enough weapons, because once you run out of them, then even if you've got an elite QB, you could be in real trouble. And for the people saying Aaron Rodgers is not the player he once was, let's not forget he's gone off 2 MVP seasons in a row, so he hasn't just fallen off a cliff in 6 games. And
no, there's got to be far more at play.
Yeah,
there does have to be far more at play, but you do have to, he will have to take some flack, obviously.
Definitely.
But it's definitely not just on him.
There's a good podcast that was recorded yesterday that discussed that in more detail as well, mate.
I'm going to have to get these 14 yards ads done so we can just play those at these sort of times. Yeah. For the love of God, everyone, do take a listen to it, because they'll have covered it in far more detail than us, and probably a lot better as well. But that's just because I'm not a Jags fan. Anyway, let's go through the 4 that were contentious, shall we? We'll start with Seattle Bucks. Owain, you did say it was a tough one to pick. You've ended up going for the Tampa Bay Bucks. Myself and Sean, I've put an asterisk over the Seahawks at the moment, but I do think I will go Seattle over Tampa. I've gone Seattle just because they feel like the hot hand at the moment, and I feel like Tom Brady is just not finding his groove whatsoever. And if he ends up having to come back from behind in a really uncertain atmosphere like Munich, I feel like it might be just one too many.
I think this is going under. I don't know what the over-under is, but I think it's going under. I think the strengths of the Seahawks align really well to what the Bucks are good at. They've got a really, really good secondary, the Bucks. They should get enough pressure up the middle with Vita Vea, and hopefully are able to stop Kenneth Walker a little bit well. I say hopefully, he's the main man in a couple of my fantasy teams, so maybe I'm on both sides of this one. But yeah, I think
It's called hedging,
I think,
mate. You're fine.
yeah, I think at some point Brady has to look a little bit better than what he has. I'm not saying he's gonna, from this point onwards, run the show in the NFL, but I think he has to look a little bit better than he has done, and I think Gino has to look a little bit worse than he has done. So, for me, if they both sort of get closer to the mean, sort of say, I think the Bucks just scraped this one, but it was a tough one to pick. This.
Yeah, this one was a tough one. The over under is 44.5. By the way, so yeah, that one I think is going to be a close one. Sean, was this a bit more cut and dry for you, or are you also on the fence?
No, I've got to be honest, this was a straightforward pick for me. I think, you get 9 weeks into the season. I think you really have now got an idea of who these teams are and what they're about. I think Seattle have been one of the real surprise packages of the season, but they are there absolutely on merit. I think Geno Smith has been phenomenal, hasn't he? It's a real shame when you actually look at it, the amount of years he sat doing nothing when you consider what he's actually put on the field this year. I think Kenneth Walker, as Owen just said there, has given them a real extra dimension. There's a rumour going around that there's some passport issues with him, so we'll actually wait and see if he gets to Germany. But,
God.
Yeah, it's a bit of a bizarre one. But yeah, look, I just think Tampa. I thought the game last week against the Rams, I picked Tampa last week because they were two struggling teams, and I just thought, well, Tampa at home. But this, I think, is a totally different challenge and scenario. I don't think they particularly impressed anybody last week, and I think Seattle have been pretty dominant in recent weeks. So yeah, I would be pretty confident in that Seattle pick, to be honest.
Fair enough. Lions Bears next one. I think that Sean's the odd one out in this one. Yes, he is. Sean's gone for the Lions. Owen and myself have gone for the Bears. I feel. I'm looking at the time now. Let's just get Sean to defend that pick there of the Lions. Obviously, coming off a good win against the Packers. The Bears, though, being a rather surprise package themselves in terms of momentum the last few weeks. Is this mainly coming off the fact that the Lions are able to get the dub against the Packers, or is there something more to it?
Nothing more than a coin flip, if I'm being honest. I wished I could give you a really good in-depth answer.
I really set you up there as well.
You did. I felt guilty as you were going for it, mate. But no, I just think that the two teams the strange teams really, because Detroit feel better than 2-6, Chicago feel worse than 3-6. If that makes sense. The Bears just seem to be a really poor team, but all of a sudden, you look at the record, and like I said, there were a couple of calls last week potentially away from being 4-5. And the Lions feel like they've been in every game, but have just found a way to lose the vast majority of them. So I think, the two, poor teams in general terms, neither of them are going to be challenging in terms of the postseason. To be honest, like I say, it was just a 50-50 game. I just went with the Lions.
Fair enough. Right. The next one, I feel like we're just going to gloss over. Like, I'll put what we put down. Sean, you've gone with the Bills. Myself and Owen have gone with the Vikings. But can we just say this is an asterisk until Sunday and whether or not Josh Allen plays football?
Yeah,
I think that's pretty fair.
Yeah, most definitely.
Yeah. No, Case Keenum versus the Minnesota Vikings is a very different proposition to Josh Allen playing the Minnesota Vikings. So it all depends as to how this works out.
The line in this one, interestingly, is 6.5. I took that for the Vikings yesterday because even if Allen plays, I like that for the Vikings. I think they're much better than what some give them credit for this season. Bills didn't look great last week, so spread-wise, I would have taken the Vikings either way. But just as a pick,
I wish I knew about the spread. I wish I knew about the spread yesterday. It's 3.5 now.
Yeah, so I may even take the Bills. The Bills now and hope for a little bit of sweet spot. Sweet spot game
At
that I get
4
into.
points.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the cautionary tale on the Vikings, and I'm a big Vikings fan, but I think the cautionary tale would be if you look at the schedule, they're 7-1. You look at who they've beaten: Green Bay having a shocker of a season, the Lions having a shocker, the Bears having a shocker, Arizona having a shocker. The teams that they should beat, they have beaten. The good team they come up against, the Eagles, they lost to. Okay, the Eagles have beaten everybody. The 7-1 record is what it is. I'm not knocking it. Certainly, I wished it was our record, so I'm certainly not knocking it by any stretch of the imagination. But the Vikings have seemingly developed this formula where they take the lead in the game, then disappear for half of the game, let the opposition come back, potentially even let the opposition take the lead, and then they start playing again in the fourth quarter. They're not going to be able to do this in the Bills game, even if it is Case Keenum at quarterback, because the Bills are too good of a team to give up a lead in the fourth quarter, a sizable lead. They had to put 13 unanswered up against the Commanders on Sunday to get the job done in the fourth quarter. So, it still does come with an asterisk, that pick, because obviously Josh Allen makes a huge difference either way. But I do think even if Josh Allen doesn't go, this still will be tight. It will be competitive.
I think the line moving 3 whole points is, a big indication of where the bookies think that this is going. I think that means they think that Josh Allen probably isn't going to play Sunday. I don't think they're 100% sure because that line would have changed even more. But certainly a 3-point swing, they're thinking he may not play Sunday. So, yeah, I would lean Vikings right now, barring any other news on the contrary.
Yeah, and also just the fact that let's not try and paper over this. They lost quite convincingly in terms of the performance angle of it, not so much the scoreline, but the performance angle to the Jets. The Jets
are good.
I mean, the Jets are good. I don't think that they are, handing down a massive L to what is now probably the second best team in football. Sort of good. I feel like they are now above average. I feel like they're not as good as that performance was, if that makes sense. I feel like they definitely played beyond their station. But let's not paper over the fact that the Bills lost a shocker last week, on paper. No, the best team in football should be beating the Jets.
You're looking at. If you're looking at notorious Jet hater Josh Henwood's paper, then yeah, I think you would be spot on. If you're looking at notorious Jets lover Owen Jones's paper, then maybe it tells a different story.
I think that there was like 99% of people who picked the Bills to win that game.
Yeah, and I was one of them.
On the pick'ems. Let's just let's not bring personal vendettas into it or anything like that. No need.
By the way, though, they're in the division, the Jets.
The Jets could well do it. I mean, the Jets must be looking at the way that this Josh Allen situation is sitting at right now and thinking, fantastic, let's go.
Yeah, and I said they'd have more wins than the Patriots this season, but I didn't expect them to be above the Miami Dolphins at this point of the season. I have to be honest.
See, you should have pinned your colours to the Jets mast, not the Jags mast. You were right that there was going to be a shocker.
The Titans have won some games that scruffy games. Otherwise, that Jets one wouldn't have been
typical
bad as well.
Titans.
Sorry?
Typical Titans.
Yeah, typical Titans. But I did say the Colts would stink this season, and that's been proved right. So.
Yeah, and that's come true. I will concede that too. I thought that the Colts were going to do a lot better this year, but I also thought that Matt Ryan was going to be the answer. How wrong I was there. Speaking of the Titans, we'll come on to our last game here. Broncos-Titans. And lo and behold, Sean once again is the piggy in the middle. And I feel like every time we do the Broncos, I feel like I'm going to do the Broncos every week because Sean will adamantly put the Broncos in until they win.
I was close.
No matter what.
I've got to be honest, I was close.
So
I'm so glad you didn't because it allowed me to do this diatribe because Sean picks the Broncos every time. It's great.
So I genuinely haven't picked the Broncos for the last couple of weeks. As much as anything, this is because I think the Titans are awful. The Titans in the last 2 weeks, have 97 passing yards. That's in the last 2 weeks combined. This week, Malik Willis didn't complete a pass to a wide receiver, and the Denver Broncos defense is pretty damn good. You know, the struggles have all been on the offensive side of the ball, but I genuinely feel as though the Broncos could score 3 points and win this week.
I also feel like the Titans could score 3 points and win this week.
Yeah, look, there's every chance. You know, let's be honest. The Broncos got the job done in the Wembley game. They've obviously now been off on a bye week. Russell Wilson showed signs in that game. I was there at Wembley of finally getting some sort of chemistry together with KJ Hamler. Jerry Jeudy had himself a decent game. You know, I'm not by any stretch of the imagination saying everything is rosy in Denver. Far from it. There's still an awful lot of things that they need to do and they need to work and improve upon. You know, but I think, like I say, Tennessee are once again sitting at 5-3, leading that division. If you are a wild card team at the moment, you would be absolutely praying that you get that Tennessee game because they are once again awful. I actually heard somebody doing a Tennessee Titans podcast the other day, and they called their defense elite. They just gave up 500 yards to the Chiefs. Elite. They gave up 500 yards. Okay, they, you know, in terms of points, they didn't give up that many, but 500 yards. You know, this is a team that, for me, it's got an excellent coach in Mike Vrabel. You know, so they're not going to get blown out in games or anything like that. I think he's a good coach, but I just think they've got an awful lot of problems. We said at the start of the season, didn't we? Who is the wide receiver? You've just got rid of AJ Brown. Traylon Burks is on IR. Bobby Trees has done absolutely nothing for them. You know, he looks finished, doesn't he? Let's be honest. And like I say, with Malik Willis at quarterback, it's just been really poor. He hasn't even offered anything in the ground game, which people thought, you know, you generally get that with a rookie. Don't use a bit of a rabbit in the headlights. He'll run around, he'll make some scrambles and that type of thing. But essentially, the MO for the Broncos will be shut down Derrick Henry. And like I say, I was kind of being a little bit facetious with 3 points. I think if the Broncos score any more than 13 points, they win this game. I really do. So it's not for any sort of particular great belief in Denver all of a sudden. It's more like I say, I think that Tennessee are on a bit of a slippery slope. And dare I say, Owain, I think the Jags are still in this division.
I think so too. I literally just had a look to see what the records were. If Trevor can put a good run together, he looked better again last week. I know he started the season well. They've lost a lot of games. You know, a high percentage of those 6 games that they've lost have come within one score. So yeah, I wouldn't rule the Jags out either. I think they've been the best looking team in that division this year and probably come out on the wrong side of things a couple of times, whereas the Titans have come out on the right side of a bit of luck as certain other ones. I think the Colts are absolutely dead. You know, if I'm the Colts, I'm starting to think about tanking this season. And maybe that's what they have done with bringing Saturday in, because they need a quarterback badly. So for me, they're dead this season, and I would think about the tank if I was them.
I recall somebody calling Jeff Saturday the what was it? Was it the Duncan Ferguson of the Denver Broncos? Darren Ferguson. Yeah, the Everton player turned boss for half a season. Yeah, Duncan. Yeah, of which I could definitely kind of see. It definitely has that sort of air about it where it's just like we just need someone that like gets being a player and just, you know, looks for any kind of motivation whatsoever. It does smack of.
I don't know if either of you watch it, but I watch Pat McAfee show quite often, and obviously McAfee is massive Colts, you know, lover. He played for him all his career and stuff, and very plugged in on that organization. And I think I watched the Monday show when that got announced, and him and AJ Hawk were visibly struggling to hold in their laughter at how ridiculous of a decision this actually was, which, says an awful lot, really, considering how much, and how high esteem McAfee is held within the Colts. And, I think he was making it a point to try not to get himself in the bad books of that organization on that show, but he was struggling to hold in the laughter.
Yeah, and to be honest with you, with the rest of the league as well, because no one can understand it whatsoever. It would make sense if it was for tanking purposes, but that seems almost like gross negligence when it comes to, the whole you're definitely not supposed to tank, you're not supposed to give that away sort of thing. You're supposed to at least make people think that you're going out there to win, etc. That whole thing with Hugh Jackson, even when he turned around and said that it was implied that we were to lose games, sort of thing, and there was a huge uproar about it. This seems far less covert if that is the plan.
So the story is right that Ursay actually called Saturday mid-game on Sunday, isn't it? Like, he was so disgusted with the performance that he actually phoned him mid-game and said, "What the hell is going on here? How do I fix it?" And he's ended up giving him the job, which is, if Saturday's on the other end of that
what an interview! What a phone interview! If anybody has a phone interview out there, just think Jeff Saturday is the head coach of the Indianapolis Colts off a phone call.
Amazing achievement from Saturday to be able to wangle his way into an NFL organization as head coach without any experience over the phone. Is, he must be one hell of a salesman to be being able to do that.
Hey, if he can sell a win or two, they might just keep him around, which would be even more hilarious. That is what's known as the Freddie Kitchens effect, and no team should look to repeat that.
No.
But no, that'll be an interesting development in of itself. That is pretty much all we've got time for this way. We've somehow filled up the hour, even though we're only previewing a game. We weren't reviewing one. So thanks, everyone, for sticking around. Shout out as well to Spencer, who did give us a little note. His house move all went through, all fine. Listening to us, even though he didn't have any Wi-Fi. Spencer, appreciate your tenacity and your dedication to listening to us. We hope that you're doing well in your new digs. I'm moving myself in a couple of weeks. Looking forward to that and showing you a new background on this little mini screen here. Remember that we will be back next week. It won't be on the Monday. This is news to Sean Underwine as well. It won't be on the Monday because I'm not here. It will most likely be the Tuesday as long as you're both available. If not, it'll be later in the week. Just keep an eye on our Twitter at Believeland Brit for news on that one. Listen to the Full 10 Yards podcast as well for all things NFL this week, even though we've tried to cover it ourselves in somewhat of the bye week boredom. And enjoy the game on Sunday. We'll be then previewing the Buffalo Bills game next week, alongside reviewing all the fun in parentheses on Sunday. Have fun, and we will see you next week.